I never could have imagined it. Not even in my darkest hours. Not even in my most twisted dreams. That was just 1 month before my wedding. I would lose the woman I had once loved so deeply, I forgot what it meant to love myself. My name is David Kruger. I am 38 years old, a senior structural engineer, former lead designer at Vogel Engineering based in Denver, Colorado. I have spent the last decade building towers, bridges, stadiums, structures meant to stand for generations. But I never expected the foundation of my own life to collapse. And what made it worse? She was not taken by a stranger. She was taken by the one man I had trusted more than anyone else in this world, my boss. And more painfully, the man I had called my best friend for over 20 years, Martin Vogel. I once said his name out loud just to hear how it sounded after the truth had been revealed. It did not hurt. Not really. It just echoed hollow, like the frame of an abandoned building trembling in the wind. Before we go any further, let me ask you something. Has your heart ever been broken? Not by one person, but by two at the same time, someone you loved, and someone you would have taken a bullet for. If this story touches something inside you, hit the like button, leave a comment, tell me where you are watching from, and whether you have ever trusted the wrong people. And subscribe, because this story does not end in silence. It ends in justice. But first, let me take you back to the moment where everything began to fall apart. Katrin Bauer, that was her name. 34, a strategic communications consultant. She had this way of walking into a room like every light naturally followed her face. I met her 5 years ago during the rollout phase of the Redstone Bridge expansion. She was brought in to manage the city's public relations. I was the guy reviewing tension load simulations with a sharply marked hard hat and an inbox full of unresolved permit delays. She asked me where the coffee machine was. I told her the truth. "You are better off bringing your own." She laughed. I fell. It did not happen all at once. Love rarely does. It starts with shared lunches, then inside jokes, then glances that last a little too long. By the time I realized I had built my life around her presence, she was already inside it. When I proposed, I did it quietly, just the two of us. No photographers, no rooftop dinners, just her and me at the park bench near Riverside Springs, where she once said she could finally breathe. She said yes. She cried. And for a moment, I believed I had found something permanent. Looking back, maybe that was my first mistake, thinking permanence was something you could build with someone who studied public image for a living. As for Martin, he had been in my life long before she was. We met during my second year out of undergrad. I was 23, broke, and hungry to prove I could design structures that lasted generations. He was already a name in the industry, not quite a mogul, but close. A man who shook hands with mayors and signed city contracts like he was ordering lunch. He took a liking to me. "You do not talk like the rest," he said once. "What does that mean?" I asked. "You talk like you have something to lose." I did not back then. But maybe that is what made me dangerous in his eyes. Or useful. He gave me projects that should have gone to senior engineers, put me in rooms I did not belong in, called me partner material, before I even had a parking spot. When my father died, Martin sent flowers. When I broke my wrist on site in 2014, he covered my pay and told HR not to file it as leave. When I bought my first condo, he gave me advice on mortgage brokers. He was not just a boss. He was, at least I believed, family. Which is why it took me so long to see the signs. Because betrayal does not shout, it whispers. And I was not listening closely enough. Not yet. The first red flag came wrapped in a joke. It was at the holiday party 2 years ago. Katrin had just complimented Martin's tie. He grinned, looked at me, and said, "Dave always did have good taste, whether it is in materials or women." Everyone laughed, even Katrin. But I did not. Later that night, I told her it made me uncomfortable. She rolled her eyes and said, "He is just being Martin." And I believed her, because I wanted to. But after that, little things started shifting. Martin began calling Katrin more often. Media prep, he said. He started requesting that she sit in on our project briefings. External optics, he called it. Once, he invited her to a client dinner without me. When I asked, he simply said, "Did not want to overload the table." I nodded, but something sank inside me. The weekend she left, it rained. She did not pack much, just 2 suitcases, a carry-on, and the espresso machine her sister had given her. She did not cry. I did not either. I stood by the kitchen island, hands in my pockets, while she unplugged the toaster. "You will find someone better suited for you," she said. "I was not looking for someone suited," I told her. "I was looking for you." She never said a word. The door shut behind her with a dull click, final, like a contract signed without ceremony. I stayed in the kitchen until night swallowed the windows. Then I opened the closet and unzipped the garment bag holding my tuxedo. My hand brushed the fabric, and I caught myself smiling. Because in that moment, it hit me, they had stripped something from me, but in doing so, they had freed me too. Freed me from defending them. Freed me to remember who I was before I became someone else's shadow. Freed me to rebuild with steel and fire this time. That Monday, I walked into the office as though nothing had happened. That's the language men like Martin Vogel understand best: quiet compliance. It lowers their guard. But while I was nodding politely, I was already watching. I started pulling badge records, Katrin's late-night entries into the office during weeks she swore she was working from home. Martin's calendar notes marked "Off-site confidential." I archived everything. But the deeper cut wasn't the affair. It was the Avalon Tower project files. I began combing through updated specifications, line by line. At first the changes looked minor. Downgrading reinforcement steel from grade 5 to grade 4. Reducing wind load resistance by 12%. Tightening safety margins right up to the edge of legality. But it wasn't legal. Not under code, not under professional ethics, and sure as hell not under the name I had built my career on. They were cutting corners, stamping my name onto reports I had never signed. That was when heartbreak crystallized into something sharper: clarity. And clarity became the foundation of my plan. A week before I resigned, I took a personal day. Martin thought I was clearing my head. In truth, I met with Henry Weiss, one of the firm's founders, long retired now. He had always respected me, said I reminded him of himself before the lawsuits and the yacht. I told him what I had found. He sat in silence a long while, then said, "Dave, I made a mistake giving Martin full control. But I still hold 6% voting stock. If you bring me enough to sway the board, I'll back you." That was all I needed. My final act before leaving the firm was slipping an envelope onto Martin's desk. Inside, copies of the falsified reports, threads of emails between him and Katrin, stamped receipts from whistleblower submissions I had filed with the city, and a single note. Structures don't collapse on their own. They fail when warnings are ignored. I turned in my badge, nodded at the receptionist, and stepped outside into the sunlight. Free. Not finished, but free. When you look back, the signals glare at you. The pauses before Katrin answered simple questions. The way Martin's hand lingered too long at her back during corporate functions. Their shared laughter at jokes I wasn't part of. And the silences, not empty silences, but loaded ones, buzzing beneath the surface like a fault line. But when you're in love, when you trust someone, you interpret hesitation as thoughtfulness. You tell yourself everyone's just busy. You believe your mentor and your fiancé are simply connecting professionally. You tell yourself lies that sound enough like the truth. Because the alternative feels like standing on a skyscraper you designed and realizing the cracks aren't just in the concrete, they're in you. I met Martin Vogel when I was 21, still in grad school, still living in a shoebox apartment, convinced I could outwork gravity itself. He came to give a guest lecture on efficiency in cantilever design. Most students were half asleep, but I was in the front row, filling the margins of my notebook with questions. Afterward, he pulled me aside. "You're either going to burn out fast," he said, "or you're going to own this field." He handed me his card. That same night, I emailed him. 2 months later, I was running coffee and drafting truss models at Vogel Engineering. For 11 years I worked under him, collecting scars and lessons the long way. Many nights I practically lived in the office, leaving after midnight. He'd pass my desk, clap my shoulder, and say, "Nobody notices the guy holding the structure up until it falls." I took that as respect. Now I wonder if it was a warning. The first night I introduced Cotran at a company gala, I caught it. Subtle, almost invisible. He raised his glass, let his eyes drift over her once, and said, "Well, Dave, you've outdone yourself." Then he bent down and kissed her hand. She laughed at it, called him dangerous in a charming way. That line never left me. I remember it because that was the first night she told a story I had lived with her, a wine bar in Florence, a missed train, the sunset, and she told it like I wasn't even there. Or worse, like someone else had been. At the time I brushed it off, convinced myself people forget details all the time. But people don't forget who stood beside them in moments that mattered, not unless they are deliberately rewriting the memory. After that night, Martin Vogel started asking Cotran to join more of our client meetings. He said it was good optics. Clients like seeing a woman at the table. And Cotran was excellent at what she did, smart, polished, always knew how to make people lean in when she spoke. But little by little, the meetings started happening without me. Material bids, contractor negotiations, even budget reviews, things that had always been my territory, now had my fiancée in the seat, not me. When I questioned it, Martin smirked and said, "Relax, Dave. You're the brains. She's just there for the polish." At the time, it sounded harmless, but now I hear the venom beneath it, the way he divided us into function and finish. Truth was, he wanted both. You do not realize your best friend has let go of the rope until you're left holding it alone. For years, Martin and I grabbed drinks every other Friday, swapping stories, debating building codes. A year before the wedding, he said he was too busy traveling. The calls slowed. Messages unanswered unless they were about deadlines. I told myself life just got hectic. But really, he had found something else to fill that time, someone closer. And Cotran started shifting too. She stopped asking about my site inspections. She stopped leaving notes in my lunchbox. She stopped talking about honeymoon plans. One evening I came home early from a supplier meeting and found her in the dark, headphones on, laptop glowing. I was about to kiss the top of her head when I saw what was on the screen. Martin, standing on a red-lit stage, giving a TED-style talk. She was smiling at the screen the way she used to smile at me. She closed the laptop quickly. Said it was research for PR work. But something inside me cracked wide open. I did not accuse her. I didn't scream. I just stood there and remembered what silence really feels like. When she finally left, she did it quietly. No fight, no messy confession. Just that tired line people use when they want to walk away without being the villain. "It's not you. I just need to find myself." But she didn't find herself far away. 3 days later, a LinkedIn post caught my eye. A fundraising dinner for infrastructure innovation. There she was in the photo, beside Martin, his hand resting casually on her waist. Her eyes gleamed in a way that once belonged to me. That photo didn't go viral. It didn't make the news. But it detonated everything inside me. And that's when I realized it wasn't just an affair. It was a cover. Because while the world thought they were building something grand, I was already tracing the cracks underneath it. The first file I pulled was the Avalon Tower load projection. And the numbers, God, the numbers. They weren't accidents. They were engineered lies. Lowered the steel grade. Removed secondary supports. Adjusted tension cables to barely skim past safety thresholds. Clever enough that most people wouldn't notice. But I noticed. And every line I read felt like betrayal done with a calculator. My signature was still stamped across those drafts, but none of the modifications were mine. They had swapped them in, filed under Joint Revision Authority. Katrin signed the press releases. Martin approved the structural changes. And if that tower failed, it would be my name carved into the rubble. That was the night my grief calcified into resolve. Some men lash out in fury. I don't. I build my revenge like I build towers, with plans, with precision, with patience. Because revenge isn't about blowing something up. It is about restoring what they tried to erase, your dignity, your name. Silence isn't weakness. It is strategy. It is calculation. It is the quiet hum before truth arrives to level everything in its path. Revenge does not start with rage. It begins with access. And after 10 years of being the man who held the keys to the company's systems, I knew exactly where the cracks were. More importantly, I knew where they hadn't swept the dust. The thing about people like Martin Vogel and Katrin Bauer is that they think covering their tracks means deleting the obvious. The emails with red flags, the sloppy contract drafts, the chat logs where they got too casual. What they never account for are the shadows, the metadata, the things they can't see because they assume no one else is paying attention. But I was. For months. Even before the breakup, even before I saw them together, even before Katrin looked me dead in the eye and said, "You deserve someone who sees the world the way you do." She thought those words were closure. What she didn't know was that the morning she said them, I had already begun pulling server logs. It started with one file, Avalon_final_FG, buried deep in the shared drive, tagged as archived. When I checked the properties, I found it had been copied to an external hard drive at 11:04 p.m. on May 17th. That was the exact night Katrin claimed she was working late from home. But the system showed something else, a remote login under Martin's credentials, not from his condo or the office, but from a rental loft in East Cambridge. The lease was under an LLC called EDR Holdings. Guess who had filed the paperwork? Katrin's full legal name, Katrin Daniela Bauer. I laughed when I saw it. In all her careful reinventions, she had forgotten her own middle name, the one she once told me she hated, the one she tried to bury when she became just Katrin Bauer. Computers don't forget reinventions. They remember everything. From there, the threads unraveled fast. Shell vendors, invoices rerouted and inflated, kickbacks funneled through subcontractor fronts. Payments rubber-stamped by Martin. LLC registrations signed by Katrin. It wasn't just corner-cutting on a blueprint. It was money laundering, and the Avalon Tower was their personal ATM. The public face of Avalon was still me. The dependable designer. The safe pair of hands. Their shield, until I decided not to be. I copied everything. Didn't email. Didn't forward. I printed it, bound it, indexed it, duplicated it. Because digital evidence vanishes. Paper doesn't. I wanted weight. I wanted a sound when the proof hit the table. On the cover I typed, Avalon Tower, Compromised Integrity, Internal Review by D. Kruger. Not dramatic. Just deliberate. The person I handed it to wasn't who you'd expect. Ingrid Schaefer, Compliance Director. Everyone thought she was just biding her time after Martin had tried to push her into early retirement. But she remembered me. She also remembered when he skipped critical reporting on a bridge project in Dallas back in 2020. She flagged it. He buried it. So when I walked into her office with a sealed envelope and said, "This needs to be seen before it disappears," she didn't hesitate. She just pulled out a red pen and said, "Shut the door." 2 days later, she called me back. Her voice steady, her hand trembling slightly as she slid the dossier back across the desk. "This is enough for a full audit," she said. "And a board hearing." I exhaled slowly. She added, "You know this won't just be about them. This will shake the whole company apart." I met her eyes. "It already is apart. They just don't see the cracks yet." She nodded once. "Then I'll forward this to legal. You never gave it to me." It arrived anonymously. And with that, the first domino tipped. But then came the twist. Just as the audit machinery began turning, an email landed in my inbox. From Katrin. Subject line: If you're still you. 6 words. 8 months after she left. 3 weeks after I lit the fuse. No greeting. No apology. Just, if you're still you, you won't do this. You know how the media twists things. This won't end the way you think. Please don't ruin everything we built. I stared at the screen for a long time. We built? The arrogance of it. As if I still considered any of it ours. As if, after everything, I would protect her. My reply was 5 words. You already ruined it, Katrin. I hit send, archived the thread, and saved it for evidence. That same week, the city froze construction on the Avalon Tower. The public line was, pending review of compliance documentation. But inside the industry, everyone knew what that meant. Phones went silent. Clients pulled away. Vendors stopped shipping. The collapse had begun. And then Martin finally sensed the fault lines forming, because after 2 decades, he called me, and for the first time, I let it ring out. The following morning, I walked past the Avalon construction site. The frame of the tower stood half-finished, steel ribs jutting into a pale sky. A gust of wind caught the caution tape and made it whip like a flag of warning. I stood there, hard hat under my arm, remembering the very first sketches of that building, back when it was nothing but pencil lines on my drafting table. Back when it was mine. I remembered the pride of knowing my design would shape the skyline. And then the sting, seeing that pride stolen by the 2 people I had once trusted more than anyone else. But not anymore. From here on, Avalon would belong to them, not me. And when it collapsed, not physically, but in reputation, that fall would be loud. It would echo in every boardroom they stepped into, every closed-door deal they thought they'd get, every whispered conversation behind their backs. This wasn't rage. It was recalibration. A correction to a structure that had been leaning too long. I wasn't furious. I was exact. And precision never misses. The emergency board meeting was called for a Wednesday. No agenda, no warning, just a subject line that read: Urgent Governance Review, Avalon Tower. In this industry, you know what that means. The masks are off, and someone is about to be thrown to the wolves. I showed up early, 15 minutes before the hour. Not because I was impatient, but because I wanted to see them enter. There's a look people get when they realize power is slipping from their hands but haven't yet figured out how or why. The scanning eyes. The stiff posture. The false smiles to assistants, as if to prove they're still in command. Martin walked in first, tie knotted perfectly, smile empty. Katrin followed close behind, hair tight, face flat, phone in hand, gaze carefully avoiding mine. I didn't give her the courtesy of looking either. The room smelled of polish and old strategy. 12 chairs, a long wall of glass framing downtown Boston. I took my seat at the far end, away from everyone else, squarely across from them. Martin noticed. I saw it flicker in his expression, like a motion sensor tripped, but no alarm sounded yet. Then Helena Brandt, chairwoman, entered last. Steel gray hair, navy blazer, a voice that could have locked a vault. She didn't sit. She didn't offer greetings. She just said 3 words. Let's begin now. The tension snapped taut. Ingrid Schaefer rose from her seat and began presenting, her voice measured, surgical. No theatrics, just dates, figures, signatures. Approval stamps signed by Martin. Design documents altered post-review. PR releases bearing Katrin's name with numbers that didn't align with official submissions. No interruptions. No arguments. Then she handed each board member a sheet. This, she said, shows the blueprint we approved, and the version filed with the city. Silence. But silence can be loud. Watching their faces shift was enough. That's the thing about evidence. It doesn't need shouting to land like a hammer. When Ingrid finished, Helena turned toward Martin. Would you like to respond? He exhaled, folded his hands, and leaned forward. First, let me be clear. I accept responsibility for any oversight under my leadership. But I urge everyone not to jump to conclusions. Decisions like these involve nuance, client expectations, budget realities, shifting conditions. It's not as simple as it looks. Fog. He was filling the room with fog. I'd seen him do it to regulators, auditors, city officials. He was betting he could do it again. Katrin kept her eyes locked forward, knuckles white under the table. I stayed quiet. My turn hadn't come yet. But then came the voice no one expected. Otto Weiss, co-founder, silent up until that moment, now leaning forward slowly. Still holding 6% of the company's stock. Retired but not irrelevant. Martin, he said evenly. I've sat here and watched you talk your way out of plenty of situations. But this isn't a mistake. This is fraud. Martin blinked. With respect, Otto. No. Otto's voice cracked sharp. Don't with respect me. I built this firm brick by brick. We made errors, sure. But we owned them. We didn't hide behind forged numbers and polished speeches. And for the first time in 20 years, I saw something in Martin's face that wasn't arrogance. It was fear. You built a stage and handed the spotlight to PR while hollowing out the steel beneath us. The silence that followed was deafening. Katrin shifted uneasily, her eyes darting from face to face, like she was calculating which side of the fire exit she'd sprint toward if it all went up in flames. I still said nothing. I didn't have to. They were burning their own house down. The meeting stretched for nearly 2 hours. Every 10 minutes another document hit the table. Each inconsistency exposed like a crack in concrete. Every nod from Helena Brandt tightened the noose. By the time the last page landed, the question wasn't whether misconduct had happened, it was only how much the board was willing to tolerate before cutting the rope. That was when Helena looked directly at me. Mr. Kruger, do you have anything you'd like to add? I leaned forward, folding my hands calmly. My voice was steady. I'm not here to seek revenge. I'm not asking for my position back. I'm here because my signature was placed on documents I never approved, files that could have jeopardized lives. I paused, let the weight of that truth settle. I joined this firm because it claimed to stand for something: safety, excellence, legacy. That's why I can't sit here and let my integrity be rewritten to serve someone else's ambition. That was it. No drama. No raised voice. Just fact, sharp and clean. Helena gave a single nod. My part was finished. The board moved to a private vote, and we were told to step outside. Martin walked past me, jaw clenched. Katrin didn't even risk a glance. We stood in the hallway, waiting, 3 minutes, then 5, then 10, until the door opened again. A staffer called us back. Helena stood at the head of the table, arms folded. Her tone was absolute. The board has reached a decision. She turned to Martin. Effective immediately, your authority as managing director is suspended pending formal investigation. You are prohibited from participating in any projects or company communication. Then to Katrin, your contract is terminated. Legal will handle your exit. Neither of them argued. They already knew it was over before the vote had even finished. I stood where I was, steady, not smug, not triumphant. Just solid. For once, they were the ones unraveling. In the elevator, Katrin finally broke the silence. Her voice was a whisper. Did you plan this all along? I met her eyes. No. But once you handed me the blueprints, I knew exactly where to start. She didn't answer, and I offered no more. Let her sit with the version of me she never cared enough to understand. That night, I drove out of the city to a hilltop west of town. Quiet. Empty. Still. From there, I could see the Avalon Tower rising in the distance, cranes frozen midair, steel bones reaching toward a sky that no longer trusted them. I stayed there for a long time, wind cold against my face, phone silent in my pocket. And for the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't known I was missing. Not triumph. Not vindication. Alignment. Like something inside had finally snapped back into place, like the structure within me was sound again. They had taken a lot: my relationship, my peace, my reputation. But what they never understood is you cannot bring down a man who knows how to rebuild. Fallout doesn't come all at once. It spreads. Quietly at first. A line in a report here. A whisper in the hallway there. And then it starts to tip everything. 3 days after the board meeting, the first message came. A text from a former client. Just saw the headlines. Didn't realize it went that deep. We always trusted your designs. For words mattered most, we trusted you. Not the firm. Not my boss. Me. That's when I knew the silence had cracked. The leak came next. Someone inside, maybe a conscience finally waking up, slipped the audit to a local paper. When the article landed in the Tribune, the keywords were all there: engineering giant under fire. Manipulated blueprints. Whistleblower report filed. My name wasn't mentioned directly. But everyone in the industry could read between the lines. By nightfall, my LinkedIn inbox was flooding. Old clients, ex-interns, colleagues I hadn't spoken to in years. Some messages were short: I knew it wasn't you. Others offered contracts, jobs, meetings. I didn't reply. Not yet. I wasn't chasing applause. I just wanted accountability. And I knew it was still coming. Martin went quiet. No press conferences, no statements. Just a line from the company's legal team: internal review ongoing. No further comment. But Katrin moved quicker. 3 days after the article broke, I found an envelope at my apartment. Hand-delivered. Inside the envelope were 3 things: a signed affidavit, a handwritten note, and a small USB stick. The letter began. David, I know nothing I write can erase what happened. I never intended to drag you into this. You were never supposed to be caught up in it. For me, it was survival. I hope someday you'll understand. Survival. That was how Katrin justified it. As if betrayal was instinct, as if dismantling what we built together could be written off as fear. I plugged in the USB. It opened to a single folder titled Backup just in case. Inside were audio clips, email threads, even scanned pages from her personal notes. Every piece of it pointed the same direction, straight at Martin Vogel. He wasn't just bending steel specs, he was bending her. He had pressured Katrin, threatened to end her career if she didn't go along. He dangled their so-called relationship as leverage. And that's when I felt something I hadn't expected, not sympathy, but pity. Katrin wasn't only reckless, she had been played. In trying to hold on to control, she had become another pawn in his game, destined to be discarded. I didn't answer her letter. Instead, I sent the USB anonymously to the company's legal team. Let them trace it. My mission wasn't revenge. It was truth. And truth carried its own weight. The next turn came from someone I hadn't heard from in almost 10 years, Clara Schaefer. She'd once been a junior architect on one of my first bridge jobs. Smart, blunt, always with clay under her fingernails from the physical models she built late at night. She had left the firm 5 years back and launched her own practice out of Portland. By now she was running a team of 40 with contracts across 3 states. Late one night she messaged me, Dave, I've been following everything. You didn't just save your own name, you reminded the rest of us why we do this. Come build with us. I've got the space, and no tolerance for egos. Let's talk. I didn't reply right away. I just reread her words, then leaned back in my chair. The apartment was still bare, unopened boxes, white walls, that tuck still zipped up in the garment bag in the closet. For the first time in a long time, I felt something new. Not regret. Not nostalgia. Possibility. 2 weeks later, the headlines had moved on. Martin stepped down quietly, citing personal reasons. The firm put out a statement about rebuilding public trust. Katrin's profile vanished from the company website. Her LinkedIn went dark. And me? I could finally breathe again, steady, unforced. One evening I stopped by the Avalon site. Nothing moved. The steel skeleton just stood there, naked against the dusk. A young couple was leaning on the fence. Heard that tower got caught up in some fraud mess, the man said. Yeah, the woman replied. Thank God they caught it before anyone got hurt. I stayed quiet. And for once, that was enough. Because nobody said my name. And that was exactly how I wanted it. A week later, I sat across from Clara in a corner cafe. Black coffee, sketches spread out between us. What do you want, Dave? She asked. I want to design things that don't lie, I told her. Buildings that stand because the numbers are honest, not because a PR team polished the image. She smiled. You're hired. And just like that, I wasn't piecing together the past anymore. I was drawing something new. They thought they had written my ending. They thought they had closed my book. All they did was free my hands. And with those hands I started sketching again, not to prove a point, just because I could. Because when the dust settles, all that's left is the foundation you stood on. And mine was still solid. There's something sacred about starting over in silence. No announcements, no redemption tour. Just a new desk, fresh tracing paper, and the scratch of graphite at dawn. That's how I began again, in Schaefer Collaborative Design, a studio tucked above a narrow Portland street lined with old brick warehouses and murals fading in the rain. On my first morning, Clara slid a small pile of project briefs across the table. Your call, she said. No deadlines, no egos. Build what feels true. So I did. A steel barn redesigned as a community shelter. A modest pedestrian bridge in a flood-prone town. A veterans memorial shaped like a fractured beam, reconnected in tension. Projects that mattered, not because they scraped the sky, but because they touched the ground people walked on. 3 months passed. Slowly, my name began showing up in meetings again. Subtle, unannounced. A subcontractor from Montana emailed, "Glad you're still designing." An old classmate wrote, "I figured you'd land on your feet." Most of the time I didn't respond. Not out of pride, out of peace. Sometimes silence is the only way to protect what you've finally rebuilt. Then came the Industry Expo downtown. Big annual thing. Schaefer Collaborative had a modest booth, no flashy lights, no hype, just a 3D model of our low-cost modular housing concept and sketches rotating on a screen. I had no intention of speaking at the expo. Honestly, I wasn't even supposed to show up. But Clara asked me. "We need your steadiness," she said. "People still believe in your voice." So I went. Press shirt, quiet shoes, no badge. I slipped into the hall early, wandering the aisles. Most people passed by without noticing me, which suited me just fine, until I saw her. She was standing just outside one of the lecture rooms, her back to me. Long coat, dark hair tied low, flipping through the program like she was trying to find her place. Katrin. 3 months. No calls, no emails, no news. And yet here she was. Not on a panel. Not attached to Martin. Just there. Present. Watching. Alone. She hadn't seen me. I stayed behind a support pillar between banners about green architecture and a display for sustainable playgrounds. What struck me wasn't her presence, but her absence of it. Katrin used to fill a room, storm energy wrapped in silk. Now she moved like a shadow afraid of its own echo. Eventually, her eyes swept the space. Then she saw me. No flinch. No smile. Just a walk straight toward me. "Write to me, Dave," she said quietly. Silence stretched between us. Not angry, not sharp. Just the kind of stillness that only lives between two people who once mapped out a future, and now exist on separate timelines. She looked older, not in age, but in weight. Like someone who had carried a burden far too long without ever setting it down. "I read about the Veterans Memorial," she said. "I saw the renderings. They were beautiful." "Thank you," I answered. Another pause. "I'm not here to stir anything up." "I know." Her eyes shifted around, then back to me. I wanted to ask something, and if it's too much, I'll go. I didn't move. Didn't push. Just left space. She exhaled. I'm trying to rebuild who I was before everything. Quietly. I've started consulting again. Small firms, nothing big. But one of them is bidding on the Forest Ridge Pavilion. Your team is submitting too. I already knew. We weren't worried. I'll stay clear if it's a problem, she added quickly. I just wanted to be upfront. I didn't want you hearing it from someone else and thinking I was circling. Are you? I asked. She blinked. Circling? Trying to get back into my orbit. Her face cracked, not longing, not scheming. Grief. Not for me, but for the version of herself she had walked away from. I'm not, she said finally. I'm not circling. I'm trying to make peace with the moment I stopped telling the truth. And I think that started before you. Maybe long before. I nodded. Not agreement, acknowledgement. It was all I had. And maybe all she wanted. Her voice softened. There's no ask here, Dave. No agenda. No pitch. I just wanted to stand here without Martin, without a contract, without pretense. Just me. I looked at her for a long time. For once, I didn't see the woman who'd betrayed me. I saw someone stripped of excuses. Quiet. Flawed. Human. But not dangerous anymore. I hope you do well, I said. Not kind. Just true. Not better than us. Just, well. A small flicker of a smile. Fair enough. She reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a black velvet box. My chest tightened. She opened it, not toward me, but toward herself. Inside was the ring I had given her. Still simple. Still flawless. Still untouched. I couldn't sell it, she whispered. Didn't feel right. She placed it on the display table beside a model of our modular classrooms. Give it to someone who won't forget what it means. Or toss it in a river. That's your choice. She turned to leave. Then paused. Katrin, I said. She looked back. Thanks for not turning it into a scene, I said. Katrin gave half a smile, more fatigue than warmth. She didn't argue, didn't plead. Then she walked away. And I stayed there alone, beside the ring I once placed on her hand as a promise of forever. Now it was nothing more than a reminder that sometimes the most powerful choice is to put something down and refuse to carry it any longer. That night, I didn't pocket the ring. I dropped it in the Expo's lost and found. No note, no name, no explanation. Let fate decide. I didn't need relics. I needed frameworks. And there were blueprints waiting on my desk the next morning. The new chapter began with a voicemail. It was clipped, professional, the kind of message that doesn't request, it instructs. Mr. Rowan, this is Erica Brandt, Director of Civic Development for the City of Portland. We've reviewed your work on the Veterans Memorial and the Flood Control Bridge. We'd like you to head the design commission for the Riverview Civic Complex. I played it twice, then a third time. Not because I doubted it, but because part of me had learned to test every beam for weakness before stepping on it. The Riverview Complex wasn't a side project. It was a whole city block, performance hall, library annex, mixed-use housing. $84 million in funding. High profile, high stakes, and higher pressure. 2 days later, I was sitting in a glass-walled conference room surrounded by renderings, committee binders, and political tension thick enough to taste. Erica didn't waste time. We don't want a monument that just looks impressive, she said. We want something that lasts, that serves. We've had enough of showpieces. She didn't name names, but I knew the kind of men she meant. I'd worked for one. I leaned forward. If you're looking for poetry, hire someone else. If you want something that'll survive storms, I'm your man. She cracked the smallest smile. Then you're hired. It should have felt like a victory. But walking out of that room, I didn't feel tall. I felt heavy. Because taking the lead doesn't just mean your name's on the design, it means your name's on the blame if it all goes wrong. And after what I just walked out of, I wasn't about to hold anyone else's shortcuts on my back. So I started different. I didn't lock myself away with a pencil and paper. I opened the table. Interns, city engineers, consultants, even residents from the neighborhood that would live with the building when the ribbon was cut, they all got a seat. And something strange happened. They didn't just nod and agree. They pushed back. They argued. They improved. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to defend every line. I just had to listen. 2 weeks into schematics, a resume crossed my desk that stopped me cold. Jonas Keller. He had once been a junior analyst under my wing at Vogel and Lutz. I remembered him well. Bright mind, quiet manner, always scribbling notes like every word might matter. Martin had once sneered that Jonas was too soft for the industry and tried to shove him into admin work. I'd fought to keep him in design. Then, one day, he disappeared without a goodbye. Now his name was sitting in front of me. At the bottom of the page, a single line, still learning from your old design notes. Hoping there's space to build again. I asked Clara to bring him in. He showed up early, same as always. Older now, shoulders squared, eyes tired but still burning with that stubborn spark Martin had tried to kill. I interviewed him myself. Halfway through, he stopped and said, "I still remember what you told me back during the South Point project. You said, a structure isn't about carrying all the weight. It's about guiding where the weight goes. I think I finally get it now." I smiled. Truth was, I hadn't fully understood it back then either. But now I did. It meant trust. It meant letting the team take their share. It meant not trying to hold the whole building on your own. I hired him on the spot. And as Riverview's design grew, so did the team. Arguments flew, sketches bled red with revisions, people disagreed. But every draft looked stronger. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't building alone. The blueprints belonged to everyone who touched them. Then one evening, Jonas knocked on my door. He was holding one of my original stress tests for Riverview. His face was tight. I ran it again. Jonas told me, his tone careful but steady. "There's a flaw in the roof span tolerance." I frowned. I had checked that math 3 separate times and it had held. But I didn't wave him off. "Show me." He laid out the numbers, and sure enough, he was right. I had missed a variable tied to thermal expansion in the new composite steel we were testing. The shift threw our margin off by 3.8%. Still technically safe, but not sound. In the past, a man like Martin Vogel would have brushed it aside, saying something like, "We'll keep an eye on it later." But I wasn't him. I circled the error, looked Jonas in the eye, and said, "Good work." Then I walked straight to the drafting table, erased the entire roofline model, and redrew it from scratch. No ego. No excuses. Just correction, the way it's supposed to be. That evening, Jonas sent me a short message, "Thanks for listening. I used to think being right meant people respected you. Now I think maybe it just means they finally hear you." I replied, "Sometimes being heard and being respected are the same thing. You just need the right room." The next morning, I stood on the empty Riverview lot, eyes closed, letting myself imagine its weight. Not the concrete. Not the deadlines. Not the politics. Just the future it would hold. And for once, it didn't feel heavy. It felt balanced. Because the truest foundation isn't concrete, it's integrity. And for the first time in years, mine wasn't cracked. The envelope arrived on a Thursday. No return address. Heavy cream paper, ink slightly smudged. Inside was a folded sheet with just one word at the top, "Martin." I stared at it for a long minute before opening it. Not out of fear, but because I didn't want to hand it power. Eventually, I read it all. "David, I doubt you'll ever answer this. I wouldn't blame you. I spent years convincing myself I was the smartest man in every room. Maybe for a while I was. But arrogance turns intelligence into blindness. I'm not writing to apologize. Apologies only matter when damage can still be fixed. And I know I crossed that line long before you said a word. I built more ruins than bridges. But the one with you, that loss stings. I'm leaving. Not just the firm. The country. Somewhere no one carries my name. You don't need to forgive me. I wouldn't either. But if anyone ever asks who the better man was, it was never me. I folded it neatly and set it on my desk. Didn't tear it. Didn't burn it. Just left it there like a corroded key to a door I no longer needed. Because I didn't feel victory. I didn't feel hate. I just felt done. The following day, a notice landed in my inbox from the Portland City Archives. Someone had requested transcripts of the Avalon high-rise audit. The application came from a shell firm created only a month earlier in Lisbon, Portugal. No listed name, but I didn't need one. Martin Vogel wasn't burying his past. He was trying to reread it, control it, on his terms. That's all he had ever wanted. That night, I walked downtown alone. Autumn in Portland carried a steel-gray chill, leaves scattering brittle against the sidewalks, cranes humming faintly in the distance. I paused by a bookstore window. Inside, a woman was reading aloud to children, her voice calm and deliberate, carrying weight in every syllable. She looked nothing like Katrin, but the cadence reminded me of her back before everything fractured, when she could explain a pitch with ease, before the lies, before the silence became permanent. And just like that, I realized something. I hadn't truly thought of her in weeks. Not her perfume. Not the way she once slipped her hand into mine. Not even the ring box she left behind at the expo. But Martin's letter had unearthed a question I thought I'd buried. Not longing. Not regret. Just this: did she ever love me at all? I don't know why it mattered. But it did. Not for closure, but for clarity. Because sometimes life lets you move on without answers. Other times, the absence of an answer sits like weight you can't quite set down. The next morning, I found a folder on my desk at Schaefer Collaborative. Clara had left a sticky note: client background check. European proposal. Review before we respond. I opened it casually, skimming. Halfway through, a name hit me like cold water: Weiss and Nova International Communications. CEO, Katrin Weiss. Lisbon, Portugal. The address was the same building where Martin had registered his new LLC. That wasn't coincidence. It was choice. I didn't know whether Katrin and Martin had left the country together or if they simply ended up in the same place by coincidence. All I knew was that their paths had converged again, and somehow, they'd circled back into mine. Not for love. Not for reconciliation. For business. Her new firm had placed a joint bid for the Cultural Pavilion project, the same one Schaefer Collaborative was shortlisted for. I shut the folder, leaned back in my chair, and stared up at the ceiling tiles. I had two choices. I could flag the file, tell Clara the truth, and quietly cut them out of contention. Or I could leave it untouched. Not because I was weak, but because real strength sometimes looks like refusing to play at all. At lunch, Clara sat beside me on the weathered bench out back. Her eyes flicked to the folder resting on my knee. "You saw her name?" she asked. I nodded once. She didn't push. She never did. After a moment she added, "I'm not asking you to work with her. I'm asking if this building matters more than what happened before it." I let the silence breathe. Finally I said, "If the committee ranks her bid on its own merits, so be it. But I will not share the lead with her. Not again." Clara nodded like she already expected that answer. And that was it. The past didn't own the future anymore. It simply sat next to it, no longer steering it. That evening I walked the boundary of the Riverview site. No steel yet, just stakes and frozen ground and white breath curling in the air. I stopped at the eastern corner, where the first light of morning would eventually strike the glass face. Then I pulled Martin's letter from my coat pocket. I read it one last time and pressed it into the dirt. No anger, no triumph, just release. The quiet kind that doesn't cheer, but settles in your bones and stays. By March, the cranes began to climb. Low rumbles in the dawn, girders rising inch by inch, reaching like hands toward a second chance. Riverview had officially broken ground. With it came the chaos. City reps dropping by unannounced. Calls from vendors stacked 3 deep. Timelines that no longer fit on charts. They bled into every conversation, every late-night sketch. Even Clara, usually calm, kept scanning the budget spreadsheet like it might suddenly grant her peace if she stared long enough. That is when the first solution appeared, disguised as logic. A subcontractor pitched it at a coordination meeting. Young guy. Expensive suit. The kind of confidence you only see in people who think you've already agreed with them. We've run the numbers, he said, tapping his tablet. If we swap out the R3 composite for ZR5, we save about 280 grand on Phase 2. I already knew the math. ZR5 was technically legal, but just barely. It degraded quicker in torsion, especially under high wind. Our roof was designed to flex under lateral load, to breathe. Switch the material, and the whole behavior changed, not by much, but enough to matter. Jonas spoke before I did. That's a mistake, he said flatly. ZR5 can't handle long-term fatigue. Not over 20 years. We'd end up bandaging it with bracing that wasn't even in the load path. The room went still. Jonas turned to me. The subcontractor smirked. Relax. I'm just giving you options. No need to get defensive. And that's when I felt it, the pull. The familiar whisper, cut the corner. Take the win. Nobody will notice. It's not wrong, just efficient. I'd heard that voice before. In Martin's office. In boardrooms where silence was cheaper than honesty. But this time, I wasn't the only one standing up. Jonas had already drawn the line. And now he was watching to see if I'd hold it. I leaned back in my chair, folded the file shut, and looked around the table. We don't build for 20 months, I said. We build for 20 years. R3 stays. The rep raised an eyebrow. Your call, he muttered. I saw the judgment in his eyes. To him, I was just another relic, an old man clinging to principles in a world chasing profit. Let him think it. I didn't need to win the argument. What mattered was making sure the building would stand. After the meeting, Jason caught up with me in the hallway. He was tense, unsure if I had backed him up or left him hanging. You were right, I told him plainly. He blinked, let out a breath. Thanks for not folding. I looked him straight in the eye. You're not here to agree with me. You're here to catch what I might miss. He nodded. No more words were needed. In our field, respect is usually silent, like steel hidden beneath concrete. A week later, I got a call from a senior city planner. She opened with praise, then slipped in the pressure. We're hearing concerns from council members. Return on investment, cost of materials. Would you be willing to adjust the specs on interior systems? There it was again. Not corruption, just erosion. Small chisels at the base of principle. I told her what I told everyone. We don't adjust the building to fit the budget. We adjust the budget to fit the truth. She went quiet, then said, That's a brave stance. No, I replied. It's just a load-bearing one. On site, things moved forward. Steel rising, foundations poured clean. No hidden edits, no backdoor approvals. And with every inspection we passed, I felt something harden inside me. Not arrogance, conviction. Because I'd seen what happened when men traded integrity for convenience. And I'd buried the reputation of the man who taught me to excuse it. I wasn't going to be him. Near the end of the month, Catherine asked me to speak at a fundraising dinner. Just 5 minutes. I said no at first, but then I thought of Jason, of the intern who stayed late recalculating drainage for the community garden, and the mother who wrote a letter saying her autistic son was excited about a building for the first time because it looks like it wants to breathe. So I stood at that podium. Plain suit. No slides, no notes. Buildings can lie, I said. They can stand just long enough for someone else to take the credit. But eventually, they tell the truth, through cracks, through echoes, through the way people feel inside them. This project isn't just steel. It's a promise that we'll never again call something dishonest beautiful. The room was silent. Then one person stood. Then another. And the stillness shifted, not asking for recognition, just holding the weight of what was said. That night when I came home, I found a drawing on my chair. Jason had sketched Riverview in pencil. At the bottom he'd written, "This time, it will stand." I put it in my drawer. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. It wasn't just about the structure, it was about what we refused to compromise to build it. The doors opened at 7:03 a.m. No cameras, no ribbon cutting, no speeches, just glass panels sliding apart and footsteps on new concrete. The civic complex belonged to the city now. Not to the architects, not to the donors, not the committees. It didn't need me anymore. It had become its own. I stood across the street with a coffee in hand, collar pulled up, watching people stream in. A nurse heading to the health wing. A father with a stroller stopping at the map. 2 teenagers laughing, pointing to the rooftop garden. The building welcomed them like it had always been there. No show, just warmth. Inside, Jason texted me a photo. South corridor is holding. Light hits perfectly at 7:09. Nothing else. He didn't need to. Engineers speak in tolerances and shadows, but if we do it right, our structures carry more than weight. They carry people. I skipped the donor brunch. Catherine gave the speech. She named every member of the team. She didn't name me. That was our agreement. No plaques, no spotlight. I'd had enough of names on walls. What mattered was that the wall itself would last. Later that afternoon, I walked the edges of the building, fingertips along the seams. Not checking, remembering. Each beam held a story. Jason catching that miscalculation, the interns fighting for natural airflow, the night I redrew the access ramp so a veteran could enter side by side with his daughter. None of that made headlines, but it made a building. At 4 p.m. I sat on a bench beneath the southern arch, watched the sun slide west, shadows stretching. And something settled in me. Not silence. Not absence. Completion. The kind of breath you don't know you're holding until you finally let it out. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Foreign code. A message, no words, just a photo. A girl, maybe 6 years old, running through the main corridor, arms wide, laughing in the morning light. Behind her, in soft focus, stood a woman half in shadow. I knew the profile. Elena. No caption. Just an image. Not reconciliation. Not regret. Just recognition that something we built still meant something. I didn't reply. Didn't save the photo. Didn't delete it either. I let it sit there, like an old sketch for a project that never broke ground but taught you how to build better the next time. That evening, I stood one last time beneath the arch. The building glowed gold behind me. From inside came the echo of a child's laughter, pure, uncalculated, unengineered. And I smiled. Not because they'd remember me, but because they wouldn't need to. I didn't build Riverview for my name. I built it so they'd forget the cold, feel safe, and begin. That was the justice I'd waited for. Not revenge. Not recognition. Just knowing it would not fall. Here's what I've learned: not every betrayal needs fire. Sometimes the truest response is to keep building, quietly, steadily, until those who left you behind realize they're not even on your map anymore. You don't need to destroy them. You just need a life strong enough to stand without them. Not out of anger, but out of restoration. If this story spoke to you, leave a comment, tell me where you're watching from. Hit like if you've ever had to rebuild yourself. Subscribe if you believe quiet strength is still strength. Because sometimes the strongest structure is the one built in silence.